There is a town in North Ontario with dream, comfort, memory, despair. And in my mind, I still need a place to go. All my changes were there. Blue, blue window behind the stars. Yeah, the moon on the rise. Big bird flying across the sky, throwing shadows on our eyes. Leave us helpless, helpless, oh helpless. Baby, can you hear me now? The chains are locked and tied across the door. Baby, sing with me somehow. Blue, blue window behind the stars. Yeah, the moon on the rise. Big bird flying across the sky, throwing shadows on our eyes. Leave us helpless, helpless, oh helpless. Baby, can you hear me now? Chains are locked, tied across the door. Baby, sing with me somehow. Leave us helpless, helpless, oh helpless. Helpless, helpless, oh helpless. Leave us helpless, helpless, oh helpless.
So we're kind of entering into a new season of rhythm at the land with our worship gatherings that's been inspired out of our pandemic programming squad that's transitioning into a worshiping, focusing on worshiping primarily as programming. And so you'll notice that I'm going to try and make my messages shorter, like 5 to 10 minutes. And the bulk of the worship is going to be focused kind of on this end of the worship wander, or the kind of intentionality of kind of wandering in this space with a lead-in that Cece's going to do this morning, but we'll alternate different people, kind of just inviting us to lift our focus to one, or like notice the meadowlarks, like listen to the meadowlarks this week or something like that. So you're going to kind of notice that shift, and I wanted to just offer a word of invitation that one of the other things that's kind of come out of conversations over the past few months is just sharing of our communal voice and how important that is to all of us, and just knowing that we're going to be continuing to offer invitations to share either music or a message, or kind of the guidance during the wander as the weeks unfold. So don't be surprised if you get that invitation, and know that you are always welcome to say no, and that will never be taken personally. Today we're going to be, and actually for the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at Romans 8 and talking a little bit about what it means to live in the new creation, because the new creation is really what the resurrection of Jesus points to. So we as Christians commit to live in this, and I'm going to use this word that might make us uncomfortable for a minute, and then I'll explain, but we live in this umbrella of Christological mythology, which just means mythology doesn't mean that something's untrue. It means actually that, to me, it kind of means that it's above truth, that it doesn't need to be scientifically proven. It's something that we commit to believing in because it gives us hope and because we believe there's promise in it. And I think that more now, more than ever, we really need things that we feel like give us hope beyond the things that we can see and what we're experiencing. And so we commit to this, reading the stories in here, not just because, it's what it means to be a good Christian and we have to believe everything verbatim, but because we believe that somewhere in these stories there is a message of hope and truth that's going to make it all worth it. It's going to give us meaning. So we can shape meaning out of the things that we're reading. And Romans 8 for me is a place to begin wrestling with, okay, well, this is what it says, and this is what we've been told it means in our culture, which is a little twisted. But what's underneath all of that? What's able to be resurrected from this text that's reflective of God's unconditional love? So I'm just going to start us off with a few verses here. So now, those who are in Christ Jesus are not judged guilty. Through Christ Jesus, the law of the Spirit that brings life made me free from the law that brings sin and death. The law was without power because the law was made weak by our sinful selves. But God did what the law could not do. He sent his own Son to earth with the same human life that others use for sin. By sending his Son to be an offering, God used a human life to destroy sin. He did this so that we could be the kind of people the law correctly wants us to be. Now we do not live following our sinful selves, but we live following the Spirit. So there are a lot of trigger words in here, I'm imagine, for some of us. The idea of sin on Easter, remember we talked about that as understanding that sin really reflects our separateness from our true selves and from God's love, right? And that's easy to do. I think that happens moment by moment, feeling like I'm not good enough, or nobody likes me, or people think I'm weird. Like, that's all kind of this reflective nature of being separate from the reality of who we are. Because if we are, which we believe we are, created by God as really just unique, irreplaceable people, we have something, each one of us has something to give that no one else can give. And it's not something that we have to go out and find and achieve, right? We've been talking about this in our small group, but it's just already there. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to earn it. It's not something you have to go and discover. It's something that's already there, and you cannot get rid of it. It's impossible to get rid of. Like, you can't remove your heart, right, and then keep on living. This is the same exact thing. And so I think it's really helpful to frame the idea of sin and this rejection or inability or difficulty with believing that about ourselves, believing that just like everyone else, we are irreplaceable and special, and the world would not be the same place without us. And so when we are going to begin to talk about this journey of living in the new creation, I think that's the starting place. That Jesus came in this story that we find our foundation in. That God loved us so much, we believe, that Jesus came to tell us. Clyde, actually, this reminds me of your story from this week. So Clyde went to go visit Patty Jo's mother-in-law, and she's been quarantined because she lives in a facility for older people. And they found out right before they were going to drive to Kansas City, right, that they were back on quarantine. And so instead of saying, oh, hey, well, we'll reschedule this, they drove all the way to Kansas City to spend 30 minutes a day. Right?
Yeah, we have to that's why we did it.
Well, and I mean, the idea that God probably had a lot of ability to reschedule without getting any raises, losing any of his ticket value. So, and still, God decided to show up and say, hey, no, look, I love you. And I want you to believe that no matter how bad things get or how bad you feel, that the reality is that you are loved and that you have meaning and purpose in this world. And so I'm going to just share an example with outside of just our personal identity, but how kind of as humans we're created to forget things. So I think you're all going to like this because I kind of thought this was funny. Remember when we had that big storm, the last really big storm? Did anyone notice, or was it just me, that the weather people were a little more snarky than usual? Like, did anyone notice that? Or it might have just been my interpretation. But so I think that snowstorms, I've heard, are harder to predict than any other type of storm. And I know there's all the science behind it. But the snowstorm came later, a little bit later than they had predicted. And so I'll just be full disclosure. I was like, oh, they've messed this up. Like, we're not going to get as much snow, and I know better than to do that, but I just knew what I was thinking. So then the next day, or I think it was like Sunday, the news people came on and they're like, well, for those of you, I think it was like 9 News, for those of you who thought this wasn't coming, here it is. And it's like this idea that with weather, in everything in our culture, we've kind of just got to this point where it's hard to believe anyone anymore. And I think it's kind of because we're living in this age where we kind of feel nervous about stuff. So we just want something to be right, to feel like we have a sense of certainty. And so this weather prediction thing actually has gotten to the point where they're going to, and they normally do this, but they're saying that there's a change that's going to be coming to our local forecast that's hopefully going to make things a little bit, feel a little bit more certain. But so NPR reported that the data that our weather forecast is based on, it is going to be updated. And so that it'll make the warmer climate literally the new normal. They report, and we all know this, but that the past decade was one of the hottest on record. And so they're going to drop the 1980s, those averages, and wrap in the 2010s. And so this research shows that what they're finding is that people are really good at simply resetting what feels normal. And that there's kind of a danger in that. She says, we're not aware of how much warming is happening on a regular basis. It's that slow grind that's eating away at the changing normal that doesn't give you the opportunity sometimes to sit back and look at what it used to be. Steady warming has a big impact. And so they're saying that it helps fuel increasingly extreme weather, wildfires, floods, and hurricanes. And these big events are the things that people notice. These are the things that are increasing people's awareness around the climate crisis, right? But what's really the dangerous is this rising temperature that we're really not noticing because we just get used to things so quickly. So this report in a different research study reported that Americans' sense of normal weather seems to reset about every 5 years. So people they did it by finding tweets. So people send out more, I know, people send out more tweets when it's unusually hot or cold. But their sense of what made for unusual weather was fairly short-sighted. This is a challenging finding for many climate advocates because it suggests that people update their sense of normal weather faster than climate change will occur. In other words, many Americans will simply never detect that anything has gone wrong with the weather. So this interesting aspect of human nature, that we begin to think that things are normal when they're not. So imagine going through your life, and as a kid you have an interest, and that interest isn't maybe football or something that's normative, like in our culture that's identified as something, whatever, is cool or makes you popular. Or maybe you look different, or maybe you talk different, or maybe you have anything that makes you human, because honestly, we're all different. And someone says something to you, and maybe they don't even mean it, or maybe they do, and it sticks to you, and it starts to feel normal. So every time you move forward from that place and you get a message that resonates with that one first thing that hit your heart, that one thing that made you feel as though you were separate and different, that you weren't irreplaceable, that you weren't loved, that first time, and you keep moving forward, it starts to feel normal. And we need big events like Easter. We need stories like Easter, the big things that remind us, that reset us on the reality of the new creation that is. No. Shake it off. Leave it behind. Resurrect, right? Stand up and see ourselves in the light of the new creation. And we're going to talk about in the coming weeks of what that means. So as we are able to stand up and be reminded that we do have purpose and meaning, and we're able to do work in the world, that each individual is gifted with an ability to do and work in the world that nobody else is. And we're all equally as important, but we're all equally as irreplaceable. And once we have these big events that remind us of this truth, we're able to stand up and begin to walk into the world to see things like the climate crisis, to see things like racial injustice, and to be able to participate in a life-giving way to co-create this new vision that Jesus introduced us to. So I'm just going to invite us to hold this as we walk through the rest of the service. This idea that as we wander, and as Cece leads us, and as Tony sings, that we're called to reconnect as much as we're able to that sense of belovedness and perfectness through God's love that rests in each and every one of us.
Who do you love? Who you gonna love? Who you gonna love when push comes to shove? And who you gonna fight? And how you gonna fight? Who you gonna fight to make it alright? And why sometimes does it feel like all I wanna do, all I wanna do is cry, 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 cry. the loss of the innocence, the struggle of the immigrants, unlawful imprisonment,